I was a little boy sitting with my parents in my local church. And I don't know what it was like for you when you were little, but we had stained glass windows, which are beautiful, beautiful windows. Some stained glass windows don't have pictures. They just let the light in. But these particular windows where I grew up in, there are many, many sermons and stories in those glass, including the one where we sat next to. And when the sermon would be tiresome for my little ears anyway, I'd look at that window, and it was the window of the Good Shepherd. And perhaps you've seen the picture of the Good Shepherd. And he's holding the lamb. He's carrying the lamb. And I just remember feeling so secure, and I wish that he would hold me, the Spirit of Christ in me. And I don't know if that was determinative of me becoming, if you will, a shepherd, a pastor, but it certainly warmed my heart as a little boy, that sense that Jesus is our Good Shepherd. And I began to do a little research because there are at least 20 names for Jesus that are in the New Testament. Jesus, the Master, Rabbi, King of Kings, Christ. Jesus is the Son of God, the Son of Man, and so forth. But almost always, for people like you and me, the one name that seems to resonate is Jesus is the Good Shepherd, the Good Shepherd. That sense of caring, if you will, and carrying that little baby lamb, that lamb that I wanted to be, that he would carry me. And it's not unusual, therefore, that so many churches in the country of all denominations use that name shepherd in the title or the name of their church. Here in our synod, we have 10 churches that I counted they have shepherd of the hills, shepherd of the desert, shepherd of the mountains, whatever, lakes. And they all denote this sense that Jesus is reaching out to wherever we live. Jesus is caring for us. I was very, very lucky to go spend one interim here in a church, Shepherd of the Valley. It's a Presbyterian church. Many of you know it, perhaps. It's on Montano near Coors. It's a wonderful, wonderful church. And it's very much like us, the sanctuary, except it's larger. And it's very full of light, like this one, which I love. And I would go there and spend about 10 weeks there. And after the first service, we came out and had coffee, and I was meeting people. It was so nice. And I noticed they had a room there, which I later found out was the columbarium. And it's right where you have coffee. It's a separate room. The columbarium would be, that's where the ashes of loved ones from that church were taken, and that became like a prayer room. It's beautiful. And I was remarking, what a lovely thing to have in the middle of the coffee hour, this sense that you're with the living and you're with those that are now with the Lord. And at this moment, I was watching about 6, 7, and then it looked like about 15 people walking into that room, and it was like a meeting was going on there. And I asked somebody at the coffee hour, was I supposed to be at a meeting? No, Pastor. That's every Sunday morning during this time, there's an AA meeting inside. A what? An AA meeting. And I thought, gee, that's brave of those people to show who they are. They're going to go walking right into that AA. And I said, does anyone worry about being public about that? And he looked at me and said, no. They know that everyone in this church is praying for them as they walk in, praying that they're supported by, if you will, the Shepherd of the Valley, the name of their church, Shepherd of the Valley, as they go through their difficult moments. How about that? And this name, Pastor, or in Spanish, El Buen Pastor, if you are up in Chimayo sometime, you should go there. There's a tiny little church. Again, it have to be Presbyterians. This is their hour in my sermon today, okay? The Presbyterians. Again, you know where Ortega's is in Chimayo, where those beautiful, beautiful goods are made from the looms. And about a block and a half down that road by Ortega's in Chimayo is El Buen Pastor, the Good Shepherd. And that church has been there for over 100 years. Again, what's it do? It reaches out to that whole community of Chimayo. And that's why sometimes these churches, if you will, become the name that they are. Like we're a community of joy, and I think we've become, I hope through the years, what? A community of joy. Why? Because that's who we are. And therefore those churches that are like that, they do that. We are the Spirit of Christ. And lucky me, I was also a pastor at St. Peter's Church in New York City, and there they have one of the most beautiful chapels you've ever seen in your life. If you're ever at 54th and Lexington, Midtown, go to that church, and deep into it, there's a beautiful room, and it's all white. It's the chapel there of the Good Shepherd, and it was created by an artist named Louise Nevelson, who's Jewish. Poor pastor at that time was trying to raise money for it, and he did. And then you get a lot of backward glances. Wait a minute, you can't have a Jewish person doing an artistic explanation of the Good Shepherd through this art. What? He said, what? What? The Good Shepherd belongs to everybody, not just Christians. It belongs to everybody. It's everything. And of course, he prevailed and became the Chapel of the Good Samaritan, and she prevailed with this extraordinary piece of art. I hope you'll go there. Pray sometime, will you? And so we have this Good Shepherd Day, and it's so important. And I was thinking about this, remembering about how the Good Shepherd is carrying the lamb and caring at the same time. I know that's a play on words, caring and carrying. And I began to think about those images of people who have carried us through our lives. Parents, for sure, who carried us to the baptismal font, carried us through life in many, many ways. And it's a remembrance today of our parents and our friends and those others in this congregation. I think about this church here. So many people, you've carried people here. Sometimes you carried me when I've been down or lost or whatever. We all have done this to each other, this experience of caring and carrying. And about 5 years ago, the college where I went to, they invited freshmen coming in for their first year to the college to, during the summer, read a book. And then they would discuss the book in the first week of orientation. And they chose one of the great books about Vietnam. They wanted to expose these freshmen to Grandpa's generation and sometimes their own dad's generation of those that fought in Vietnam. And they picked as their book, the great book by Tim O'Brien, maybe you know it, The Things They Carried. The things they carried. And what were they? And he writes a little bit about it in the first chapter. He said the things they carried, they were can openers and pocket knives and heat tabs and wristwatches, dog tags, mosquito repellent, chewing gum, candy cigarettes, bags of marijuana. I think that's right. Salt tablets and packets of Kool-Aid, lighters, matches, sewing kits, sea rations, and 2 or 3 canteens of water. And too often, he writes later, too often, they carried the fear of death. Too often, they also carried the hope of all civilization. And too many times, they ended up carrying each other. There it is. And that response from that freshman class to understand what that whole Vietnam generation was like was very, very powerful. And I bring it to you because it is a powerful thing, and they did carry each other. And they did go through those awful things, and they carried so much on their back, and yet they were so brave as they did it. Yesterday morning, I watched the funeral for Barbara Bush. It was very powerful because it was so rich in music, and it was very lovely, and I didn't see every part of it. But it was a very powerful story about her and really about how faith provides us this opportunity to walk toward the Good Shepherd and to be a part of the Good Shepherd in our lives. And she was a Good Shepherd in her own way. And at the end of the service, they had the cortege begin, and they took the casket, remember, down the aisle and then into the hearse, and then they drove off to Texas A&M, where she would be placed in the Bush Library place for eternity. And you didn't get to see that part. And I wondered if, as members of this church, you realize that there's a little bit of a liturgical action that takes place when the casket leaves the hearse with the pallbearers there, usually 6. and the casket goes to the cemetery plot. It's the very last part of the worship service. Then what happens then? Well, what happens, at least in our tradition, as Lutherans and others, the tradition is that the pastor leads the casket to the final resting place. Well, what does he do? What does he say? He has his prayer book or her prayer book. And what do they say? The Lord is my good shepherd. I shall not be in want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. And I remember walking on grassy knolls. I remember walking on cinders. I remember walking in the desert. He revives my soul. He guides me along the right pathways for his name's sake. No matter who I led, who was in that casket, who was led there, there was always a story of love, always a story of hurt for some people, always there. And I shall fear no evil. For you are with me, and you are with me, and your staff, they will help me. And you spread a table before me in the presence of those who trouble me. And so you've anointed my head with oil, my cup, what is it, is running over. There's so much that God gives us that runs over even. And surely your goodness and mercy, what? Shall follow me all the days of my life. And then there's this, I will dwell in the house of the Lord. How long? Forever. There it is. This Sunday, just once a year, brings us together with the power of the Good Shepherd. The caring and carrying of Christ in our lives. May you know that love each and every day. Through Christ we offer these words. Amen. Amen.